Hi there. Welcome to the Resilience Warrior podcast, where each week we talk about different topics on resilience through a warrior or a monk. And today's topic is about relationships, relationships with your clients, or relationships in general with people. And Dean Graciosi talks about like loving your client, and loving your client or loving the person that you're selling to, or doing your best to make a good impression on. Here's some things I've learned throughout the last year that might help you as well. And if it does, leave a comment below. Talk about what helped you, or subscribe through my YouTube channel. So, one of the first things I'm going to talk about is feeling your gut. Myself, I'm a very intuitive person, so I tend to feel energy more than most people. Maybe it's through the meditation practices that I've done, and as well as being a massage therapist, where you get to touch many different people and feel through touch, as well as being in martial arts. Being able to fight people also gives you some idea to the way that people react. So, in feeling my gut, being able to, I think there was a disconnection with being in my gut. And this was possibly caused by a lot of step 4 issues on whether it's step 4 for a relationship, like the end part of a relationship where you hit a home run, or the step 4 of being able to close a deal or close a sale. And thinking about that, in the literature of like yogi or chakras, there are two sides to it, of either having union or lust. And I think those were the ideas. And in the negative way, it's always lust, because step 4 is, or at least the ability to see so many different body parts as a guy, to seeing so many women, and having that imagery be able to like, be so available, rather than intimate or conversations or a general feeling of safety and security. I had 3 really bad relationships where, I mean, on my part, there were things that I had to fix, but didn't know how. And on the other side, there were just a lot of crazy to that. I don't think I can go into that because it's definitely not PG or even R-rated. So, in doing that, and feeling my gut, being able to listen to my gut and work with my gut as long as possible in learning this, I'm able to develop more of intuitive mind to setting intention, and just being able to trust my body to know what is the next step, because there is no actual next step now. It's a lot more about where am I feeling and how can I calm myself down or tame my own expectations. So with that, it's dealing with the next part I'm going to talk about is dealing with uncertainty. And in war, uncertainty can be a fog of war. It's a you want to see a full picture view, but you can't. You want to know what's on the other side. You have to scout, or something that they call the OODA loop in military terms, on being able to observe things in real time and make fast decisions about what the next step is. And with the OODA loop process is a constant gathering of information, taking action, and then reassessing whether that was the correct action. And in dealing with uncertainty, it's the mind wants to create a story, wants to tell you something that'll make you feel good. And in my next book review, it kind of talks about this with Oliver Sacks. In in an absolute absence of a sensory feeling, like if you were to lose your eyesight all of a sudden, and it got so stressful that your brain would create stories, literal vivid images of what you think that you're seeing, but you can't see, and it would create imagery that would allow you to feel more pleasure, less alone, less isolated, or some sort of story that you would see in the movies before having to um, before having to have eyesight again, because the eyesight's completely gone. Same way that with any other sensory deprivation disorders, that they have both a positive and negative reaction. But I think the mind still, despite having those issues, goes more towards pleasure rather than pain, in the sense of having the negative association or positive association on trying to create something because you're already in a state of pain. Not to say that if you're in a state of pain that you would not also have negative associations. And with that and sales, I mean, the no's are massive. It's very few yeses. And in thinking about having to switch gears with that, which is more of a mental challenge. It's a mental challenge to reframe things in such a way that would create a story that would keep you going, if that makes sense, on dealing with uncertainty, to get to the point where you could be certain. Not like in myself, I can be certain about all sorts of things. And in the external world, I have to deal with the uncertainty and manage it in such a way that my mind is saying that it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right, no matter what happens. I posted a thing about better or better, because giving two options on the sense of like I'm either doing well or bad, in the state of having to always be more often being graded on a sense of how bad I'm doing versus how well I'm doing. And in thinking about that, well, even if it's bad at this moment, that there are cycles to going past that bad and getting to better. Because in the same way of like in science, there's a thing called general adaptation syndrome. I think that's what it was called. And your anxiety is highest at the top of the starting of something. And as you continue, despite the anxiety, despite the sadness or the whatever grief that's going on, that and process it, that it eventually subsides. That you reach a more point where you're more stable and can continue. And I just think of this like at least going to school. Like every month I go to school, like or like, you know, before a fight. Like before a fight, you get really anxious. You gotta calm yourself down fast. No matter what's happening, no matter what, like if somebody died, if somebody got injured, if you're injured, and accept the moment as it is right now, in order to move forward. And in the same sense of like using monk ideas of those things of like uncertainty is a needing of an outcome that is in and of itself uncertain, and creating stress because it's thinking that your brain is unconsciously thinking that you need to stress about this. And in reframing that, that's where we get into reframing things about ego and betrayal. When things happen and when things go wrong, ego gets in the way. Ego says that I should have this. Ego tells me that when I'm at my highest, when I'm like feeling really good, like I just made a win, that I can completely, fully be myself, regardless of what anybody says, regardless of what is happening. I can just enjoy the moment, and maybe even more. Be way more happier, way more joy, way more excited versus when going through the trenches of having to create a business and things aren't working out. And then in that sense of when things aren't working out, it feels like betrayal because it's like, well, they told me that this would happen. They gave me this method. They gave me all of these things and wanting to blame other people as well, where I think before I would blame a lot. I wanted somebody else to take responsibility for the things because I had no control. As a kid, I had no control. And there wasn't a way to advocate for myself. And learning to have to advocate for myself constantly, even though it's extremely stressful and anxious driven and sometimes paranoia because of the, like, things would be fine. People say they'd be fine. And then next thing you know, like a couple days later, it's not. Still, it was not forgiven. Things would still keep replaying. And I think in relationships that's kind of like keeping score in that sense, like going through the Time to Rise Summit, which was free. Tony Robbins talked about like when you reach a point of just the scorecard, it's still like, okay, well, when things happen badly, then I want to count all the things that are going badly versus count all the things that are going well. And even that clearing the whole scoreboard, because keeping a whole scoreboard that for long periods of time and is not moving you towards the direction of getting better, it can't possibly, if you're counting things to make yourself feel more down because of shame-based disgust or other sorts of things that don't empower you to move in the direction that you need to move. If it's delaying you, those things are detrimental to having a healthy ego or really understanding betrayal. I mean, things like I talk about this in my course about like who is the enemy, and if we can depersonalize the enemy of like the enemy is this person or the enemy is that person. No, the enemy should be the idea or the thing that you're getting from that. Like if it feels anxious, it's like the enemy is anxiety. If it feels like betrayal, the enemy is betrayal, not the person to some extent. I mean, it's harder to separate when it's like a hard thing that happens and it feels like, how could they possibly do this to me? And I think in that it comes in past trauma relating and thinking about, well, one side I have to ask myself after, I still have to go through a whole grief cycle. People say don't cry, don't scream, don't do this. And maybe if you don't want to do that in public, you haven't created enough social freedom to or like tolerate social embarrassment, because that definitely takes some leveling up to do. That it's more about like letting that energy go. The other side of that is like in certain military books about trauma that they encourage soldiers to cry or to feel whatever they're feeling. As well as 988 for veterans, for the crisis line, they encourage you to take a whole day if you feel shitty to just be shitty and just be shitty and then give yourself a deadline. Like tomorrow, I'm not gonna be a bitch about this. Like like that's. And that's coming from a place of like, I need a whole day to process whatever went wrong and forgive it and forgive it, which I think when you're experiencing past traumas, the past trauma gives power because of, well, they did this to me, well, they did that to me, well, this happened, and yeah, some of it'll stay. But the less power you can take from a trauma preventing you from moving in the direction that you want to go in relationships, in door-to-door, in phone calls, in creating an agency, like those things need to be forgiven. They need to be let go in some sort of way. because all it does is hold power over you. It makes you smaller. It doesn't make you big. It tells you not to do things that are the obstacles to your life, that these obstacles must be overcome and they always must be addressed. Otherwise, it's just slowing down, it's losing momentum, it's stopping, and it's expecting too. And thinking about my previous relationships and attempting to be in a relationship, that having to think about the relationships in previous because of the things that it triggers certain things. But when you're in a state of wanting to get better, then those thought processes, they run their course and they extinguish, and there are processes to that, and having to process things in grief, and that is also what I'm creating my course for. So the other part of that is tension over time, like just keeping a scoreboard or just waiting too long. At some point, you can't keep the thoughts of whatever has happened over time, and it creates this bitter, this anxious, this scarce mindset, this scarcity of like, I didn't get enough, I'm not getting what I need, and it puts you in a position of not a problem solving, but again of retracting, of not going back towards solution oriented thinking. And solution oriented thinking is constantly a thing of in my process, at least, is of de-stressing, deframing, and then reframing. DDR, I mean, thought about it with like Dance Dance Revolution, and I was like, well, because sometimes when I de-stress, I'll go dance, or I'll go do something that allows me for 5 minutes to just shake it out, to like clear out my body. Maybe I might need an hour session to do some movement, and then, or again, like feeling the thing, then de-stressing from it, and then deframing it, which in deframing is like, what do I need to learn from this, or what is it that I need to do in order to preserve my mind in a way that's not going to break down, rather than have another breakdown. And maybe if I do have a breakdown, how can I bring my mind back in, so that again, I'm moving towards solution oriented, I'm moving forward, I am moving towards what the outcome that I'm perceiving at the end of the year, or in the next quarter, or this quarter, or whatever quotas or metrics that I need to meet. And then afterwards, in learning all of the new lessons, I try to be thankful for it. I mean, some days it'll be the moment where I can be thankful, but instead of hating the past relationships that I've had, that I can be thankful for all of the moments that I had with people, rather than expecting, oh, well, maybe I just had one moment with somebody and I wanted more than one moment. Instead, I could just be happy about the moment, or the feeling, the positive feelings. When I was in a breakup, I couldn't do that, and I spent a long time feeling very angry at the thought of like, well, how could they do this to me? But now it's like, okay, well, I can be thankful for it, and thankful for the things that didn't happen, because they weren't meant to happen, in the sense of like, well, this wasn't supposed to happen because it just wasn't right for me, or it wasn't for me. And God is telling me that it is not for me at any moment when things aren't going my way, and that I need to do whatever it takes to get to where it is these moments are for me, whether it's doing doors, or learning something about relationships, or talking with people, or figuring out what is pretty much like empty from these holes, these gaps of not seeing where the connection can be made in order to develop more better relationships or meet better people. And with that, like instead of feeling needs not met, it goes into no hate. Like I cannot continue to hate somebody without reasonable cause or anything. Like the amount of hate that I might have for people is no longer about like people in the date, like strangers or those things. I mean, sometimes I do feel like a chip on my shoulder where it's like I have not interacted with enough people today to feel like I'm in the community. And I have to force myself sometimes to interact with community members. But in No Hate, it's about not going into hate because of, I mean, we're not in a boxing match where I have to hate this person. We're not in, any sort of imminent threat, danger. And that has been like something that I've had to learn because the ego wants to tell me, oh, well, they harmed you, they disrespected you, you got to do this, and that. And, not to say that we're not going to get petty, but I'm not going to push myself towards a point of hate that is like, I'm going to do something really messed up to this person. And having restraint. I mean, with martial arts, developing discipline to have restraint is the biggest thing to having a better look at life. If I'm always looking at who can I fight versus how do I make connection, then it puts it in a place of like, well, why am I fighting? And part of it is like I need to prove myself. Where something happened when I was younger that I didn't stand up to, that I regret, that I wish I had done, and learning to fulfill the amount of, well, if this ever happened again, it's never gonna like be like this again. Like there's a guy who was a speaker on YouTube who had like the fastest gun disarm in the whole world, and it happened because somebody robbed his house back when it was he was a kid. When they robbed his house, he was like, I wish I could have stopped, took his pistol from him or whatever gun that he had. And the same thing, I think there was a book about House to House with Staff Sergeant David Bellavia, who had totally also had that same situation where because he got robbed, and his family got robbed, and they were all scared, and he felt powerless. He joined the U.S. Army in order to be able to protect the ones he loves and protect this country that he loves so much, that he still loves so much, and going through absolute horror. So, No Hate, it goes towards grief and acceptance. This thing happened to me. I have to grieve about it the same way of a funeral or some sort of other thing that creates like a lot of emptying or blowing off steam. And I'm just venting out what is not going well with me. But at times the problem with venting is that we have these moments that don't have the process of like, okay, well, I vented now. Now how am I going to get to the point where I vented, I've filled up my cup of like, this is so unfair. Okay, now moving forward, what are we going to do about this? Because moving forward is always going the direction and into acceptance. Like this happened. I'm grateful that it happened, despite all the stress, despite all the pain, despite all the anxiety, despite anything. I am accepting the moment as it is and thankful for the lessons that it taught me, and thankful that it gave me a new skill set or a new tool or something else in order for me to continue living my life without quitting. And so this goes into appreciating my current life. And after the dust is settled and the grieving and the processing and recalibrating ego have been created, I can appreciate the things that are going well in my life, and going back to like being thankful or counting my blessings. May sound cliche, but it's still like after all that pain, there's still to be thankful for the things that I have created for myself, and the things that are still great about me. In reading some of the texts about like romance stories or like Romeo and Juliet, after everything has subsided, the biggest question is, who am I? And I think like in having obsessions or lust or being in an actual relationship with somebody, that you slowly begin to lose who you are, because I mean, in the pleasure of things and feeling good, and then not feeling good, that you begin to wonder, who am I? Like who? And then that goes into the journal, and then going back into appreciating the current life, no matter that the things that I don't have, the things that I do have, and the memories of having the experiences that are going to make my life better, and being resolute about that. This is going to make my life better no matter what. No matter what happens, is going to make my life better. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and have a happy Sunday.